You have the whole Jekyll Island thing kicking off 1911, 1912, Titanic sinking. Well, then John D. Rockefeller retires to Florida. Why did he do that? He wanted to live forever.
This is a good change.
I think if we're gonna, fix the abortion issue, we have to fix that issue first. The mentality and the mindset of a lot of young people who sadly are dealing with record numbers of mental health issues. So
Absolutely.
That high
There's-
prices of living, just everything. It's really hard for young people today.
yeah,
There's also a much more insidious element to the abortion discussion. I'm sure this has been, maybe you guys have brought this up before, but the ancient Canaanites from the Old Testament, they were rather into child sacrifice. It just so happens, well, it's true, some of the earliest Native Americans here in Florida and southeast United States, they were into the practice, some of them, of child sacrifice.
The Mayans, too.
The firstborn. Now, the abortion movement was largely funded, directed with Rockefeller money. It was actually some of the women in the Rockefeller dynasty who really spearheaded this. And you'll notice John D. Rockefeller retired to Florida. You have the whole Jekyll Island thing kicking off 1911, 1912, Titanic sinking. Well, then John D. Rockefeller retires to Florida. Why did he do that? He wanted to live forever. He had his experts search far and wide.
Maybe he still is in Antarctica right now.
Maybe. Florida also has a good legacy of freezing people, cryo sleep, stuff like that.
like Walt Disney.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
Walt Disney.
one of
was
the
Allegedly.
one of the only functional real places that does that today will freeze you and take your money and promise to unfreeze you later on. They're in Florida, one of the few places that does that. But to the abortion thing, there's a tribe of Indians that used to live in Florida, from Tampa Bay over to Jekyll Island. That was their whole territory. They were called the Timucua. John D. Rockefeller was fascinated with the Timucua. He wanted to live like them. Okay, today, if you go to a restaurant, you'll see the dish, Rockefeller oysters. He built his Indian mound cottage on top of a Indian oyster mound. He was obsessed. They do pottery underneath the houses at Jekyll Island. And I'm sure Luke knows this is where they signed the Federal Reserve.
Yes.
And we get our taxes, et cetera, et cetera. This tribe was also very into the practice of child sacrifice.
Yeah. Rockefeller's cottage at Jekyll Island is super weird, super
Yep.
like really bad juju and like really bad kind of, crazy ghost stories coming out of it as well. Allegedly, it's also on an ancient burial ground as well.
Yes.
And there's, creatures that live within it. So that's what I've heard. So,
Yeah, you've got the, what's his name? Edward Griffith, something like that. He wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island. That was over there. A lot of people know
G.
that.
Edward Griffin, you mean?
G. Edward
Yeah,
Griffin.
J. Edward
yes.
Griffin. He's
Thank
awesome.
you.
He's been on our show a
Oh,
number of times. He's
awesome.
an incredible person.
Amazing. He kind of blew the doors wide open on the whole financial side of things. Of course, with the Federal Reserve being signed off in Jekyll Island. Well, the story kind of drops off there. On my YouTube channel, we've gone and we've tracked the life of John D. Rockefeller after that point. What happened after the Federal Reserve was implemented? He moved down to Florida, okay? Built his house in another set of Indian burial mounds, this time in Ormond Beach, Florida, the home of birthplace of NASCAR and racing and, gas. The Indians used to worship oil, too, when it came to the surface, so Rockefeller was very infatuated with this Indian culture. They, you could say, founded the art of abortion in America. The Rockefellers picked up on that. Not only that, they were big into the hermaphrodite movement. The Timucua tribe, the natives of Florida, the place where John D. Rockefeller chose to live amongst their ancient homes, this tribe was up to a third of the population, up to.
At both genitalia?
No, they only had that word back then, about 500 years ago. Hermaphrodite was the only word they had. So it wasn't both genitalia. I'm not an expert in that field, maybe you can offer some.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
But a lot of this also kind of correlates back to a lot of kind of ancient Indian tribes
Yeah.
that also performed abortions before people knew what abortions were.
Yes.
So they would, especially when it came to, of course, child sacrifice, not just when they were born, but when they were also in the womb, and they had multiple kind of larger, very kind of disgusting actions that they thought that they were kind of doing specifically in order to appease the larger gods out there in the universe. But if you can't put the microphone a little bit closer
Oh,
up to yourself,
sure,
if you don't
sure.
mind. Sorry about
Of course.
that. But no, keep going because it's fascinating stuff, especially about the Rockefeller stuff. Because Rockefeller had a lot to do with our current modern day society and why it's in such disarray that it is now.
Sure. Yeah, they were some of the earliest proponents of the LGBTQ agenda, believe it or not. It's kind of unspoken. They were behind abortion as well, and all these practices go back to not just the Canaanites from the Old Testament. That's actually why I think they were fixated on this one tribe. Is there's another gentleman who went over there after, G. Edward Griffin. G. Edward Griffin wrote The Creature of Jekyll Island. Then Timothy Bence was a pastor who went over there. He's the one who took all the financial part of The Creature of Jekyll Island, signing of the Federal Reserve. He's the one who tied it together with the ancient Indian magic. And he basically revealed that, as Luke mentioned, Rockefeller Cottage on Jekyll Island is built in the footprint of an ancient Indian burial mound, which those are all over Florida, but this one in particular was said to have an altar. The Creature of Jekyll Island does not mention the altar. It just stops with the finances. Doesn't mention the Titanic either. But Timothy Bence went over there. He showed the dark magic, the ancient practice of child sacrifice on these spots. It's the same spot where Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, and a bunch of their representatives of the Rothschilds as well, all met Jekyll Island to sign this. A lot of people know this. You know, it's out there on YouTube. The exact spot where the pen was signed was the footprint of an altar where an ancient sacrificial cult did their works. And we talk about debt and taxes. These are satanic practices. It's black magic to trick someone into thinking they owe you something when they haven't provided or taken anything from you. It's black magic, debt. Yeah, right to its core. Jesus understood this. It's one of his big messages here. But we followed this story down to Ormond Beach. That all kicked off. People can see that on lots of good people did videos. And then the story moves to Ormond Beach, Florida. Ormond Beach, Florida, John D. Rockefeller wanted to live forever. He almost made it. He was like 97 or so.
I think he was 100. I think he had a 100-year-old celebration.
He was close.
Yeah.
John D. Rockefeller, the senior, he was close, probably about 97. He died in Ormond Beach, which is why that matters too. I've been to the place. We've gone there. There's a basement there. It just so happens. Basements, you don't find them in Florida. This place has a basement. Well, then we discover he moved to Florida because he sent his agents around the world to find the place that was most conducive to long life. You want to talk about a word you said on the way in here. I don't know if I can say it, but basically that blood, things like that, can lengthen life, prolong life. Well, he was also obsessed with the Fountain of Youth story out of Florida.
Yeah. And there's a big Fountain of Youth story down here as well.
Yeah.
And there's already Silicon Valleys that use blood boys, especially in California, where they literally get younger people to give them their blood. We saw the guy who's trying to live forever, Brian Johnson, also implement the same kind of program with his own child as well.
Sure.
And then he's also giving his blood to his father. That's allowing his father to also regenerate and live longer as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm fascinated by that. As the mother of a young daughter, I'm like, can I do this? I want her blood. No.
Well, what you could do, especially if you're having children, is you could actually source stem cells from the placenta after you give birth and have those stem cells available to you if your child or you or anyone in your immediate family ever gets sick. So you could use those stem cells in order to kind of fix and regenerate yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Rich,
could save
very
those.
rich people today will often have triplets using IVF with this exact mindset that one of these children who they plan on loving and raising will, if it comes to it, will be a sacrificial goat. I actually grew up with a pair of triplets who were IVF'd, and one of them was pretty much the organ donor tag along just in case if anything went wrong. Luckily, they all made it to adulthood, but it can get pretty grim, especially on the science end of making babies, you know.
Could you imagine growing up being the donor for your siblings? Like, that's a messed up.
Well, that's another thing with IVF. That's another reason why IVF is coming up to bat in this issue is it's not just IVF, oh, we're saving people, we're helping them have children. My mother did IVF for a career. I was IVF'd, doesn't matter. But
Thank God you were born.
basically, part of the practice is creating 3 viable, they try and make it triplets almost every time. And part of the process is the other 2 don't make it, usually.
In the womb? They don't make it in the womb?
Usually intentionally. So a lot of people will qualify that as close to, if not an abortion. You're treating 2 people like options. They don't make it. Their goal was never to make it. So that's why IVF is also a hot topic. People kind of brush it off like, oh, well, just help people get pregnant. But there's a lot of wasted pregnancies, wasted embryos.
Also, a lot of
in
those
IVF
embryos that don't get used get destroyed. So it's like an abortion. Or you leave it frozen. and
Or I mean, there's even people talking about that being like a commodity, like I've seen that.
Oh, totally. That's one of the earliest black market commodities.
Yeah, if you look at what's happening in Ukraine right now, there's a huge baby trafficking market where a lot of the women there are just using their bodies as surrogates for a lot of rich people.
Right.
That's going on here, too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I've seen a lot of these cam girls operating fighter drones and with their free hand a lot of the time. They got a little bit of a cam girl problem over there in Ukraine, too.
I want to know, not to switch topics, but going back to your talk earlier, you mentioned the Titanic. Do you have some beliefs on if there's important people on there that were possibly not wanting to implement the Federal Reserve? And
Yeah, if the Titanic made it to the United States, we wouldn't have a Federal Reserve system.
that's what I was alluding to.
Yeah, the 3 greatest opponents, we have John Jacob Astor IV, Guggenheim, and Isidore Straus. You have the 3 greatest opponents to the Federal Reserve System, not just the
They're on
act.
board the Titanic.
They were all on board the Titanic. You want to talk about astrology. J.P. Morgan was the richest man on earth when he was alive, probably neck and neck with John D. Rockefeller. They were good friends. Well, they also had astrology in common. They loved astrology. They loved mysticism. It was all secret. It was all behind the scenes, as you'd expect. But J.P. Morgan was a famous astrologer. He carried around a one-of-a-kind pocket watch. Rich people have pocket watches, not wristwatches, right? Billionaires have pocket watches, not wristwatches. Well, the pocket watch that J.P. Morgan had, one of a kind. It had 5 hands instead of 2 to track the movements of the bodies in the heavens, the astral bodies. So he was a practicing astrologer. He was a financial astrologer. Most big hedge funds will consult some type of astrologer or something just to be safe, just like soccer teams will. They get pretty crazy with that. But J.P. Morgan said millionaires don't use astrology. Billionaires do. He not only funded the Titanic, he insured the Titanic. He was the VIP guest with the largest suite on the ship. He did not show up the day of, unannounced.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was insurance scam, it was a ploy to knock off the opponents to the Federal Reserve, which he was a proponent of, or it was just he saw the fates and dodged a bullet.
Being clairvoyant, yeah.
Some combination of the 3, I would say. But that all ties into the Jekyll Island thing. Boom, we get the Federal Reserve, opponents out of the way. All the good money in America was pretty much gone. All the, big, strong billionaires who were on the side of good, they're out of the way. And some people would even debate that. But John Jacob Astor, that's where we get Waldorf Astoria schools. A lot of this theosophical movement, too, was in bed with the Astor family. There's a city by the name of Astor in Florida. And the Astors, Rockefellers, these
New
guys.
York City, there's Astor Place.
Of course, yeah. And a lot of our friends probably went to Waldorf schools. But these were kind of the forces of good, and they kind of lost this battle. We're not going to lose the war, but they lost this battle. Titanic was a big hit. But then John D. Rockefeller, he wants to move to Florida. They pioneered the art of retiring to Florida. oysters Rockefeller, like I said. This is like old people's favorite food in Florida. The Indians made their mounds
Martha's
out of
favorite, too.
oysters.
It's my favorite too.
Sure.
I like oysters a lot.
Yeah.
I don't like
I'm
oysters.
thinking about you, Luke.
Now, basically, he had his agents search the world for the place that would be most conducive for him living forever. He wanted to live as long as he could. He wanted to make it to 100 real bad. Now, part of that lifestyle, he only drank water from what he believed to be the fountain of youth in Florida. That was part of his decision to go move down there. And he would buy this from a specific bottling station. It was called Orange City Water. You can look this up, Orange Water. Florida spring water. Florida was discovered because Juan Ponce de Leon was looking for the fountain of youth. And Rockefeller, it doesn't matter if you believe that story, you believe that Rockefeller believed that story. He knew the real deal about Florida history. He was obsessed with this tribe. Remember that tribe I was describing? Sacrificed their kids, did the whole LGBT thing. A third of the population was, pretty much transgender. They also... Shit, I forgot what I was going to say. My bad.
Not so fun.
You were talking
You're
about
tripping out Robbie. Robbie's like totally in the zone
I
right now.
know.
He's like, whoa.
Yeah.
You were talking about the tribe that was in Georgia that they had a third of their population was I don't know how they were doing transgender. They were doing surgeries back then. How were they even doing transgender stuff?
You don't have to do the
I don't
surgery
wanna
for
know.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to do
Oh,
surgery.
here.
You can-
Here. So that tribe, when the Spanish and French first showed up to Florida, these are the first Europeans setting foot on, the continental United States. This matters, right? You don't get your pretty little Jamestown Pocahontas story. We're talking about 7 foot tall trans child sacrificers. Like this was a new
Nephilim?
This was a new world. Yeah, that word has been thrown around. With if people want to see the altar that I'm talking about too, you can go look up New Smyrna. No, not New Smyrna. That's East Coast. It's called New Port Richey Temecula Stone. You can see what one of these ancient Temecula stone altars looked like, just like the one that our Federal Reserve System was founded on top of. And you can see it's 2 faces on a stone. Temecula, Timucua. Timu, like Tim, like Temecula.
I
Newport.
feel like Luke
I'm
is our
dyslexic.
genie.
This is not the job for me.
It's Richie with a Y. That's probably one of my videos.
Right there.
Yeah.
All right, cool. We'll put it
But
up here.
some of the people who like argue against this story, like we went to the Jekyll Island Museum, they didn't like us there, and they were.
Is this the stone right here?
Yep, that's what a Temecula altar looks like. You can see it's a big flat stone, big enough to stretch a person across. There's a cavity on the top. There's 2 faces carved into it, like old faces carved into it. I mean, this is dark magic we're talking about.
Where are the faces?
That's a cavity in the middle right there. The faces you'll see here in a sec. I didn't take this video, but God bless them for going there and taking one. I've taken a couple. He might show you here, whoever that is, a couple of the faces on this rock. And it's bone chilling. You go out there, you know exactly what they're talking about over in Jekyll Island. People who
There,
argue
I
against
see the
this,
face right
yeah,
there.
there's
Where,
one.
where,
There's
where?
one face. He'll point back down to it. Yeah. There's
Right there,
one
right
face
there.
right there. Yeah. So those are ancient petroglyphs. Those are some of the only petroglyphs in Florida, and you can see there it encompasses Jekyll Island over to Tampa Bay. Big stretch of territory. These people were very tall, but what's very important is they're said to have lived to 300 years old. That sounds ridiculous, right? Well, the Bible tells us some people were living to 900. When you look at Florida water, there's something to this. There's species, and I hope everyone's aware of the Fountain of Youth story. It's a reality.
For the people who don't know, what's the lore and how does it connect to
Sure.
Florida?
Yeah. So Columbus, we just had Columbus Day here a couple weeks ago. Columbus was looking for something. He had navigators, an Irish navigator who'd been across the Atlantic before, and he bounced into the Bahamas. Well, the Bahamas are just about a chain of islands off the coast of Florida. Well, 20 years go by. The United States is pretty much untouched. The Vikings were there way before, but we're talking about age of discovery. The Spanish and French show up, and that's 1513. The Spanish show up. That's Ponce de Leon leading this expedition. the story, infamous Orson Welles tells this story. Hemingway was obsessed with this story. It's Fountain of Youth. First, they land in the Bahamas. They're getting stories about the Fountain of Youth. Hey, there's people over there who stand very tall. They have cities of gold. They live for hundreds of years. It's remarkable. And Juan Ponce de Leon, they heard this, and they heard of a land called Bimini. Bimini was one of the original names for Florida. Today, it's just a little island at the Bahamas, but Bimini used to mean all of Florida. So they heard about these waters in Bimini that give long life. In Juan Ponce de Leon's case, he was actually, it's joked, one of the earliest references to the Fountain of Youth is that he was impotent. He had erectile dysfunction, and this fountain got the job done on that too. The Floridians had never heard of such a condition. So they hightail it for Florida. They land on Florida, they mess around for a couple decades. 1565, voila, you get your first city in the continental United States. St. Augustine, Florida. That's
Beautiful city.
it's remarkable. Well, that whole area, it's where Rockefeller, his business partner, Henry Flagler, that's his co-founder of Standard Oil. Everybody knows about John D. Rockefeller. Nobody really knows about Flagler.
Unless you're a Floridian.
Right.
Flagler Beach.
Exactly.
Flagler, the street that divides Miami from north to south.
Yeah.
He's the one that built the railroad all the way down to the Keys. I mean,
Thank
if
you.
you're Floridian, you got to know about him.
Right. And there's a Flagler Memorial over here in Miami. You can rent a jet ski out and go see it. It's one of the largest obelisks in the world behind the Washington, D.C. monument. They made one to Henry Flagler.
Is that the one here in Miami Beach?
Yeah,
There's
They made a whole island for it.
Yeah. I had never seen it being a local Floridian until I went to an RFK event. Luke, I'm sure you remember.
Make America Healthy
Yeah,
Again.
and one of the houses, literally, you can see this obelisk from there. And I was like, wow, I had no idea that's there. Interesting.
A lot of obelisks here in Florida.
Totally.
A crap ton of them everywhere.
Well, it's a very phallic state. If you've ever seen a map, it's very...
A lot of GMO mosquitoes, too.
That's why it's such a great state. It's a
Yeah.
very, penile,
Virile.
very fertile,
yeah.
very representative of the male junk.
Well, it's
state.
very representative of America, too. You'll see this whole drain the swamp, DC's no good narrative. You're seeing a political recentering into Florida, and that's really true to America's history. The legacy of republicanism in America, Florida.
Florida took off the map. I mean, I was living in California. I moved here during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people from blue states had moved. A huge influx of people.
Totally.
That's right. Bow down to my Florida. This is the... No, I'm kidding.
We're working
Make
on...
Florida
No, this
free
is a
again.
very special place. I love this space. There's special energy around it. I definitely want to learn a lot of maybe how to use some of the information that you're talking about,
Sure.
because it's definitely fascinating. So yeah, that's happening. As of course I've been telling people to prepare for a very long time. I just released a video about how to prepare on lukeunfiltered.com, a special secret, not so secret society where you get to join a lot of really cool, awesome people and be a part of the larger conversations that no one else really has. I go deep down the rabbit hole. I talk about my personal decisions. I talk about things that I do in my life that I am using information on in order to, of course, better it. And that's the information that I try to share with you in order to help promote, build, grow, and expand our human consciousness, wealth, prosperity, and liberty. Freedom is in your hands if you decide to act on it in the proper way. And I've built lukeunfiltered.com 12 plus years of behind the scenes videos just on that basic model alone of trying to give you the tools, the information, the seed oil cards, the crap list of items you should be avoiding at the supermarket. That's all available for members of lukeunfiltered.com. If you haven't signed up yet, what are you waiting for? Signing up is key, it's crucial, and it's more important than ever. Sign up right now, lukeunfiltered.com. It's quick, it's easy, it's simple. You go here, and whatever your budget allows, I know times are hard, but for just $8, 20 cents a day, you could sign up right here, click it, and then you just put in a little bit of information. You get emailed back a login, you log in, and you get a lot of really awesome values that are a lot more valuable than Netflix. You have a choice. You want to do Netflix? or you want to do lookunfiltered.com. Make that choice. Vote with your dollars, vote with your clicks. Start to decide your own life path right now. 3 master classes that will teach you some really incredible skills. Do you want to sit there and be glazed by the satanic, evil, corporatist, demonic propaganda that plays on your subconscious and emotional, psychological weaknesses? Or do you want to be uplifted and, of course, enlightened and given information that a lot of powerful people don't want you to have? That decision is yours, and it starts with you signing up to lookunfiltered.com. Sign up there right now, and I will see you there right after this broadcast. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you signing up to lookunfiltered.com. And because you do, this is why I love you guys. Stay tuned for more here on youtube.com/wearechange.